Sometimes people can be born with superhuman abilities. We may think that situations like this are reserved for science fiction novels or superhero comic books, but things like this are far more common than you may assume. Sometimes people are born with incredible strength, but other times they're born with abilities that we cannot even comprehend. You may think that these are simply incredibly rare outlier cases, but situations like this are strangely common. Martin Joe Lorella. Martin Lorella was born in Germany sometime between 1885 and 1896. He was originally known as Martin Emmerling and would live until 1955. He was given a stage name when he began to show off his ability to turn his head completely backward, turning it over 180 degrees. This strange talent would lead him to becoming a worldwide sensation, with people from across the globe coming to see him perform his crazy and wacky stunts. It didn't take long for Martin to gain the attention of serious investors and artists after he began his career in 1921. He would soon be featured in Believe It or Not and would later tour the world with Barnum and Bailey. This is where he would find most of his fame, performing almost nightly in acrobatics and showing off his bizarre skill of being able to turn his head further than any other human. He would also gain the attention of the Ringling Brothers and began including animals in his acrobatic performances, much to the amazement of fans and carnival goers. His ability to twist the vertebrae in his neck was uncanny. No one could understand how he was able to do such a thing, but there have been theories that he was able to dislocate the vertebrae in his neck, giving the illusion that he could simply turn his head further than anyone else. Some wonder whether this dislocation was intentional or accidental, but whatever it was, Martin used it to his advantage. He would continue to travel the world and show off his strange ability for decades, and his popularity began to boom in 1930. He would bring in massive audiences for his performances and raked in tons of money as a result. To say that he died a wealthy man would be an understatement. Martin had found his way into the hearts of people around the world and left behind a legacy that would not soon be forgotten. Wang the Hornet. The story of Wang the Hornet, better known as Wang the Human Unicorn, has been floating around since the 1930s. Wang was a man from China who had a horn growing from the back of his head that measured around 36 centimeters. He was discovered by accident when a Russian businessman was visiting China and happened to notice him passing by. The Russian man took a photo of Wang and sent it over to Robert Ripley, the owner of the Ripley's Believe It or Not museum and book series. At the time, Ripley was one of the most well-known freak employers in the world. Though the term freak is often used in a derogatory way now, at the time it was simply used as a way to describe people who may not fit in with the rest of the world. And Wang certainly fit that bill. Needless to say, Ripley was incredibly interested in Wang and wanted him to travel across the world with him, showing off his abnormality in exchange for a hefty payment. Ripley is said to have offered Wang a massive amount of money, but Wang disappeared a short time later. Neither Ripley nor anyone else ever heard from Wang again. No one knows why Wang didn't accept Ripley's offer, but I guess money really can't buy everything. It's possible Wang was simply embarrassed by his abnormality and didn't want to make things worse for himself in the long run. Little did Wang know that he wasn't the only person in the world to have been born with such a large horn. In fact, horned people have popped up all throughout human history. As far as we know, the earliest document of a horned person came from the 16th century, when a German surgeon reported a man who had a horn growing from his forehead. Most cases like this only describe horns that were less than 30 centimeters, so in the case of Wang, his horn was incredibly long. What makes the horns even more traumatic for people is that if they are removed, they'll just grow back later on. So for the most part, it's best to leave them alone. Mary Ann Bevan. The story of Marianne Bevan is incredibly odd, tragic, yet also heartwarming. It's truly an emotional roller coaster, to put it lightly. Marianne was born in 1874 and was considered the ugliest woman in the world, though I'm sure many people would beg to differ. For some reason, her face began to disfigure as she grew older, and most people believe this is because of an overactive growth hormone that caused her face to continue to grow after she had already exited puberty. Known as acromegaly, Marianne's face would grow to large, odd proportions as she continued to age, leading her to develop an incredibly masculine appearance that was far too large for her small stature. This didn't stop Mary from continuing with her life as usual, though. In an amazing turn of events, Mary refused to let her disorder slow her down, and she studied to become a nurse, making quite a name for herself. She did well for her family and would give birth to several children alongside her husband. However, she would tragically lose her husband just a few years later, leaving her a widow for the remainder of her life. After her husband passed away, she was unable to make ends meet. She was no longer a nurse, but considering how many people feared her appearance, she had the idea to join a freak show. This would prove to be her most profitable idea yet, and she would show herself in freak shows across the world. For the most part, it didn't seem like Marianne let her appearance get her down. Instead of feeling misplaced and bad for herself, she used her strange looks to her advantage and traveled the world, raking in tons of money along the way and entertaining thousands of people. This is a perfect example of the age-old saying, "Beauty is in the eye of the beholder." No, Mary may not have been the most gorgeous woman in the world, but she continued to use her appearance to help others by giving them a gift of laughter, entertainment, and a show. By all means, Mary was an incredibly confident woman who refused to let her disorder get the best of her. The Elephant Man, Joseph Carey Merrick. Joseph Carey Merrick has been given the nickname the Elephant Man because a strange disorder caused his skin and bone to look like elephant flesh, sort of. It's pretty difficult to understand where the term Elephant Man came from because his skin and shape appear more like rock than anything else. His disorder was so incredibly severe that it changed the shape of his face and caused his bone to grow to proportions that are unimaginable, making his face almost twice the size of a normal person's. Doctors are still unsure of what caused this strange behavior. As far as we know, he likely suffered from a genetic disorder that caused his bones to continue growing far more than they should have. The disorder also seems to have affected his nerves and skin cells, leaving terrible patches all across his body. To make matters worse, Joseph was a fairly small man, though his arms and head grew far larger than they should have for a man his size, making it difficult for him to find clothing to wear and almost impossible to fit in anything he could buy off a shelf. To this day, scientists are still hard at work, doing their best to figure out what caused him to grow to such strange proportions. We have DNA samples from his body, but scientists are left baffled as to what could have led to this. One theory that led to his nickname is that it could have been a terrible case of elephantiasis, though this is just an early theory that is most likely untrue. Another possibility is that he suffered from Recklinghausen's disease or some rare version of Proteus syndrome. Whatever it is, scientists just aren't sure. We hope that one day they'll be able to find out what caused this condition so that we can prevent it from happening in the future. The Bubble Boy, David Vetter. The case of David Vetter is incredibly strange and tragic. David Vetter was never destined to be a normal boy. When he was still in his mother's womb, doctors began to realize that something was terribly wrong. He didn't seem to have any ability to fight off infections, meaning his body was under constant attack from bacteria and pathogens. From the moment he was born, his immune system was almost completely shut down. As soon as he exited the womb, he was rushed into a sterile container in the pediatric ICU. He would stay there for quite some time while doctors did their best to figure out how they could help him. Before long, they began to realize they couldn't. As David began to grow, a team of scientists at NASA offered to help him by building a sanitary chamber that he would spend the rest of his life in. This led to him being known as Bubble Boy. The researchers developed what would essentially be described as a large bubble that the boy would live in while inside his family's home. Inside of the bubble, he would keep all of his toys, his bed, and anything he would want or need in daily life. He would be visited by journalists from around the world who wanted to tell his story and share it with the masses. The large, airtight chamber that he lived in would help him stay far away from harmful pathogens that may be in the outside world. Filtered air would be fed to him through an advanced system, and all of his toys and belongings would need to be sanitized before he could touch them. Once he was inside the chamber, all was well, at least for a while. The difficult part about David's condition is that simple things like eating a meal became super difficult. Most of our foods contain some form of harmful pathogens, but our bodies are naturally able to fight off these bacteria and keep us happy and healthy. In David's case, that wouldn't be true. Something as simple as a fly landing on his mashed potatoes could have meant disaster for him. In the end, doctors came up with a plan to cure his condition. His sister offered to provide him with a bone marrow transplant that would help to stimulate his immune system and bring it back to normal levels. However, they soon learned that his sister had been affected by Epstein-Barr, a fairly harmless viral infection. However, for David, this harmless infection would lead to the end of his life. As the virus took over his body, the doctors realized there was nothing else they could do. When his end had finally come, David was allowed to exit his bubble for the first time in his life. His mother was allowed to kiss him for the first time on the day that he left this earth. While some of these cases are obviously far more tragic than others, you have to admit, some of these people were born with otherworldly abilities. We cannot forget the tragedy that surrounds cases like David's, but these situations have provided doctors and scientists with invaluable information that they can use to help treat others in the future. In losing his own life, David may have saved thousands of other people. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like button and ring the notification bell for more videos.